Welcome to the NYC Workforce Drop. I am Greg Morris, the CEO of the New York City Employment and Training Coalition. This is the first pod post Nixon 5 championship. I hate to give myself or my guests credit, but as we opened up every pod, we were inching closer to a championship, and it has happened. This is the first time. Now, it'll be months removed when this podcast drops, but just for a moment, no matter where you are, if you're on the beach and the water is lapping up on the shoreline and you're on your chair listening to this podcast, or if you're at your local coffee shop, you got a croissant, you got your Americano, whatever it is you're doing with yourself, just pause for a minute and think to yourself, Nixon 5, that's a pretty special thing. Speaking of special things and special people, Maria Torres-Springer is here today. She is the president of the Charles H. Revson Foundation, but you might know her from a number of other extraordinary responsibilities in New York City, including first deputy mayor. I have a great deal of admiration and respect for Maria. And in coming in, we sort of thought about talking about economic opportunity. We dig into, and we got into a little bit of that. We got a little into workforce development. We talked about the city. We also talked a little bit about her history and that pathway that she has been on during the course of her life. And inherent in that, we talked about public service and what governance looks like and how it is that people need to be at the center of how it is that we do what we do and how we do it. And I don't think there's a better representative of that than Maria Torres-Springer. Spoiler alert, in this podcast, we do not talk about the New York City Economic Development Corporation directly. Now, if you've read anything I've written recently or things we've talked about or published or recent event we had with Abney on the topic of economic justice, I've said my piece on NYC EDC, the Economic Development Corporation, and that we are this far into the Mamdani administration without a designated lead for that shop. And I did not want to get into that with me. So spoiler alert, if that's what you're looking for, that's not the conversation Maria and I are having. But I suspect if you listen to this podcast, wherever you are right now, folding laundry, on your skateboard, I don't know why you would be doing that. But if you are, I just want you to know that as she's talking and as she's thinking and as we're sort of having a little bit of a back and forth about the vision of the city and where the city is headed and what it all means, you should definitely be thinking to yourself, who is the right person to be leading the Economic Development Corporation? And why is it at this particular moment in our city's history, when there's so much opportunity for growth, when there's an intense focus on the working class, that we don't have someone in that seat at this moment? That has not happened. But I hope listening to this pod, you get a sense of the type of individual who should be in that seat and why that seat matters. Because it's essential to our work as we go forward. Because the intersection between economic development and workforce development has never been more important. And when those two pieces are working in the way that they should be, we should be fulfilling our economic justice vision. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce Maria Torres-Springer. Look who's here in the studio, Maria Torres-Springer. Let me just say this, first and foremost, as we lead us off into the pod. You and I have had breakfast a few times in the neighborhood.
That's right. I feel like I've improved your breakfast orders over time.
Exponentially. We went from to be honest, I was pretty nervous. You are a tremendous public servant. You're respected in so many different ways. And I remember sitting down with you and being like, I'm really getting to talk to Maria. And it was great.
Oh, I had a lot of fun too. So
did it seem? I hope it seemed fun. But the best thing about it is, because we happen to be in the same neighborhood. Here's a real thing, true story. I remember coming down the block after a day where I literally have a bag with like a half-eaten burrito in it. I'm talking to myself because it's just been a miserable day. And as I'm passing down the corner, who do I see taking out her recycling?
Ah, yes.
Like you're a human being.
I mean, we're on a 4th floor walk up. There is I have no choice.
You're like we're human. This is the thing. We're human beings who have things to do. And you were so nice. You're like, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, oh no, I don't know if you saw me. Like, just I was having a miserable. And there you are, like, wait, you don't have someone who does this for you? That's all I could think. You have kids.
Right, and theoretically, I have a husband, but
in theory,
when it comes to taking down the recycling, that somehow lands in my part of the ledger.
I was going to say, how does that end up in your part of the ledger?
I think we have this division, which I read in a book once. It's like, I take care of the things that you can see in our household. He takes care of the things that you can't see.
Ooh.
So I'll let your audience,
you know what, audience,
try to figure out what's on.
Whatever you're doing right now,
list.
if you're folding laundry, you're walking the dog, just reflect on that for a moment. By the way, I was looking at some old articles about you and videos just to kind of get immersed in the life story in some ways. And you are identified as part of a power couple. And I read that one of the things like power couple. How does that feel?
It's to use the words of my children, it's very cringy. But there is, I think, a truth in it. Sometimes I'm asked advice for early career professionals about how to lead their careers, and I often say, which I believe, that one of the most important decisions, and maybe even the most important decision, professional decision that you will make, is your choice in a partner. And by that, what I mean is you don't tackle, build, advance your career or your life alone. And so I feel very fortunate. I have a pretty cool husband who is really steeped in public service, and we have done this work in many ways as a team.
Do you spend a lot of time strategizing and or is it like when you're home, you're like, let's turn off the...
It's very much the latter. These jobs in public service are incredible, especially in a city like New York, but they're also all-consuming, and you have to create space for the other things in your life that are important. And it's certainly been a key to marital success to not talk about work,
right?
In addition to the rules of our conflict of interest board, which we take very, very seriously.
That's right. You have an outside and inside conflict of interest.
That's
I love
exactly
that.
Right.
Speaking of the kid, you're a mom, and how old are the kids now?
I have a rising senior and a rising 7th grader.
Rising senior and
in high school. Yeah,
that's so exciting.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think you hear people say that they will always be a recovering middle school parent. I have a feeling I will always be a recovering parent of a high school junior undertaking the college process. So we'll ask me in a few years how that works out, but I might do an entire podcast just on that.
We're going to have that podcast. I want to host that podcast. There's actually there's an old article from The Real Deal at the desk of Maria Torres-Springer. And it does reference your gardening skills. Still into the gardening?
My herb garden, I would say, is purely cosmetic. It's a meditation device more
Maria's
than
garden.
It is a source of things we can truly eat.
we can utilize in any other way. There's a cute thing here about referencing your daughter. When Torres-Springer's daughter Leah was 6, she sensed that her mom had had a particularly difficult day at EDC and made her a card that read, "Keep going, you're almost there."
I had that card through my last day at City Hall.
What is the last day at City Hall like, by the way?
The last day of City Hall was very bittersweet. Because of I have nothing but admiration and love for the work and for my colleagues, and it also felt like closure. It was obviously a difficult period, but I look back on all of my tours in government with nothing but gratitude, to be honest, for the opportunity to serve New Yorkers. I know that sounds like, that sounds maybe a little bit corny, but in all of those days, there were many highs, many lows, but I never took for granted that I had this incredible opportunity that's not afforded to everyone, and certainly wasn't a foregone conclusion given my background and how I grew up. And so I was thankful for every day that I had, and I think continue to have, even wearing a different hat to serve the city.
And we'll get into the work of today. I am struck by, in having gotten to know you a little bit, both in the government seat and now a little bit more outside of it. First off, I have a great deal of admiration for folks who are in the public service space. I think that's how I grew up and my orientation. But I found my career in the nonprofit space, and that's different. And there are overlapping qualities and different interactions, but it's different. And what interests me on some level is I feel as if you're one of the public officials, servants that I have known that has sought to stay connected to community. And I don't mean this, and I told you, when you left the administration, there was no shortage of folks in my world who literally went, oh shit. Because I think we were all thinking, like, who's the grown-up now? But I just want to note this to say, in my experience, there have been a number of public officials or folks who've been in city gov who maybe lose sight sometimes of what it means to be outside the walls of City Hall. And I don't think that's you, but am I making that up, or is that?
I hope you're not. It's very kind of you. And I think it all goes back, frankly, to why I got into this work. And I've said this a few times, and just telling the story of how I took on these roles. But I grew up in a working class immigrant family, the classic beats of the American immigrant story. And we did not use terms like economic development, workforce development, any of that. I did not understand these issues through policy documents. But what I did understand were the consequences of when government worked or didn't, when doors were opened or when they were shut. And, I have always had, I'm nearing 50 years old, but to this day, I have this feeling in my stomach, and I'll tell you where it's from. When I was growing up, we were growing up in Section 8 housing, and every year there was an inspection by the Alameda County Housing Authority. And it was very important that inspection go well. Because if we lost our Section 8 voucher, our rental voucher, it was literally a life and death situation for us. And so the days, the weeks leading up to that annual inspection were a source of deep anxiety and stress in the family. Everyone, I'm sure, developed ulcers. And so that feeling in my stomach, that pit in my stomach, has lingered. And when you mentioned earlier not losing sight or keeping tethered to community, I think it's really, that feeling that it matters what we do in government, the decisions that we make, the programs we advance or not, because at the other end of those decisions, those programs, all of the jargon of what policy making means is a family that either will live in stress and instability or will feel like someone is there to help, that there is a door that they can walk through in order to better their lives.
I see a quote here, one of the stories. This is the Q&A with the co-chair of the Mamdani transition team. You say, my first job, because my parents' English wasn't very good, was calling government agencies to make sure we got the benefits we needed. I knew what it felt like when someone on the other end was a helper. And when they weren't, I can imagine how that is. And this is not the first time in this podcast that people are telling stories of their lives and how folks who have sought to serve and connect with others have started from this place of how they were taking care of their families and how it was that they were responsible for that. That's got to be a tough thing to do at a very young age.
At the time, there was no choice for us, and I can't say that as it was happening, I was drawing conclusions about policy and government effectiveness. But looking back on it and just reflecting on my time in government, when I said when someone was a helper, I meant that word in many different ways. And I think it implicates the type of city that we're trying to build. We've always been a city of dreamers and doers and builders and strivers. And I think it's this interesting question, what does it mean to articulate, to say, to cherish that we're also a city of helpers? And you can help in different ways, in government, in your community, in not-for-profits, in the business community, but to think of it as not a set of heroic acts, but as all of the ways, big and small, that you can help ensure that this city continues to live up to its history and its promise for so many.
And when did you get to New York City? You grew up in California, right?
I did. I grew up in California. I moved to the city a week before 9/11.
A week before 9/11. Welcome to New York.
There, obviously, in that moment of great tragedy, I immediately felt like a New Yorker, and I saw on the worst day, one of the worst days in the city's history, if not the worst day, also the very best of New York, including but not limited to the extraordinary work of first responders, but of so many people inside and outside of government who proclaimed that the city was going to rebuild. And it was seeing that energy, that commitment, that devotion and love for our city. That's what propelled me to come into city government. And so my first job in the Bloomberg administration was a policy analyst in the basement of City Hall. But it was that experience really crystallized what it might mean to not just observe the work that is happening in New York, but to do my part.
You remember the first policy you were analyzing? Or the types of things that
Well, it's interesting. The first project I worked on was the redevelopment of Willets Point.
That was the first project you worked on?
Very first project.
Huh. How interesting.
And
we've made some progress.
We've made some progress, and throughout my many tours, different administrations, it's been really fulfilling to see how a project like that is about neighborhood building, what it means for that to actually come to life, and is a good reminder that none of this work is linear. I've often said I believe it, and I believe in the saying that leadership is neither a marathon nor a sprint; it's a relay. A project like that, together with so many others, does not just depend on one administration or one person. It requires a handoff. And when you have that baton, you take it, you go cover as much distance as you can with nothing but hope and encouragement for the next set of people to take it even further.
Taking it further, kind of I hope a New York mentality in some ways. Do you consider yourself a New Yorker?
I do. We travel quite a bit. We go to many cities, and that they all just pale in comparison to this city. I think there's so many reasons for it, but as I've reflected on it, one is that cities, I think, are one of humanity's greatest inventions. And we here in New York, 8.5 million of us, choose every day, despite the inconveniences, despite our differences,
many opinions,
to live together. So if that's not the greatest civic experiment in the history of the world, then I don't know what is.
That's
and
right.
so it's been what's kept me here. I'm raising my children here, and I have nothing but optimism born out of I think a pathological optimism that's ingrained in me for what might come next.
Were you expected to? Was this the journey that your parents expected for you?
I don't think that they thought in terms of occupation, but I always believed that, and they told me every day that they believed that that I could achieve, and And that happened, certainly a lot of hard work, but also a lot of luck that I had with good mentors, a great education, and being at the right place at the right time. And so part of when I think about my career in public service, it's been this question of, well, how do you take as much of the luck out of the equation?
Right.
Because it easily couldn't have been me. It could have been someone else, or it should be more easy to be,
That's right.
for there to be more of me in public service and in different different sectors.
I think that's exactly right. And I feel like in your path, what I know of you is your desire to, I think, connect with, educate, illuminate, advance people that you've developed relationships with, right? So this idea of lifting while you climb, I think, is something that I have heard is true for you. Speaking of, how does one go from the basement policy analyst position to ultimately and you've had a number of roles in city government. We can unpack all of those, but you to first deputy mayor. That trajectory is pretty extraordinary, and I'm just wondering how you saw that happening over the course of time.
Number one, I don't think I actually saw it or aspired for titles, but what I did see in New York itself was an unmatched capacity for opportunity and for reinvention. And I was fortunate to have really great mentors who believed in their teams and in me personally as much as they believed in New York. And so as all of the opportunities, I wasn't in government continuously, but there was always that pull back in because there's so much work to do.
That's right.
I've sometimes said that my tombstone is going to say, she just ran out of time, which might be a weird thing for someone who's been in government over the course of the last 20 years. In some ways, I've had nothing but time. But each of those roles, I had an acute sense of urgency about what had to be done, what could be done, and I could never have, it wasn't on my bingo card, the circumstances being appointed as first deputy mayor, but what a privilege of a lifetime to be able to serve in that way.
I had on my checklist of boxes to cover with you, the tombstone quote was one of them, because I thought that was fascinating. And here's another personal favorite quotation of yours. This was related to something, again, that was on your desk, a bell-shaped charm. This is you. The charm is second evil repelling totem office. This is what you said. Not that I am that paranoid, she said jokingly, but I do believe only the paranoid survive.
That's right. That's right. Well, I'm trying to unpack where that comes from. First of all, I still have that charm, although in my current role, I feel like there are maybe less dark forces to have to contend with. But I think maybe that goes back to not taking anything for granted. When you are in high stakes roles, and if you've been in them for long enough, I think a couple things happen. One is you start to get complacent and maybe sloppy, or you start to believe when someone says, no, we can't do that, or that's the only way it's happened. Or the second thing, which I think can be even more nefarious and corrosive to actually getting work done, is you become emotionally over-armored. That you believe because of the politics, the deep and serious policy implications of what you're doing, the media scrutiny, and you start to kind of lose your humanity a little bit. And I've many people who've helped make sure that doesn't happen. And so while the paranoia never quite leaves you, it's also been really important to me to really think about what does it mean to stay fully human in these roles that require you to not forget why you were there in the first place.
I can't help but ask, is there anything in relation to staying human, staying focused, in relation to how it is that the Adams administration perhaps, what's the right way to word, became a little derailed, let's say. Again, I want to be respectful of folks in service because, again, we sometimes get lost in the idea that government is good, government is bad, people do good things, people struggle. There's still a lot being uncovered perhaps about how things worked or how they didn't. But you're someone who's, I think, at the core, someone who is in service to others. And I guess I'm just curious, having been part of the admin, is there something that you take away from that experience about staying on track that you carry with you going forward? And I just have to say, like, is there a burden as well of having been part of an admin that in some cases with some lenses, folks are frustrated or at the very least concerned about what and how things happened?
I appreciate all of those questions. I'd say the first thing is that experience, and I'm so proud of so much of what was accomplished due to the extraordinary work of many, many public servants. I think, for example, the gains that we made in housing supply, that will have a long tail. A lot of really great work in economic development and small business development. So it's easy to lose sight of what the actual gains were because of a lot of the distractions and the scandals. What that experience confirmed, because I came into the administration with a certain orientation about how I wanted to live my life and do my work, the importance of always staying values driven in how you lead, in how you walk in the world, because in particular when those values are tested, when you don't abide by them when they're tested, then these are not values, they are hobbies. And I can believe that while at the same time not trying to be self-righteous about it. I have nothing but love and admiration for my colleagues who stayed and continued to do really great work. And so when I look back, I think partly because I've worked in many different administrations and I can name the programs and the projects and the work and the people that we help, I like to focus on that and then help others, including myself, like learn from that experience to answer the question, what has to come next? Dwelling in all that was difficult or controversial, I think feeds into why the public distrusts institutions, why it distrusts government. And I'd rather focus more, and I hope others focus more, on what that means for how government can do better and can repair and restore trust in New Yorkers, especially at a time like this, right, of deep political stalemate and social fragmentation. Everyone has to work even harder in order to restore trust with the public.
I think that's a great assessment, and I appreciate you reflecting on that with us. I am curious as well, and folks will be listening to this, will be a little deeper into the summer when this podcast drops. We are on the heels of an election cycle here, the primaries in New York City. I'm curious about the energy and focus in this moment, both from this administration and from folks who just found their way to some success in the primaries, about wanting this city to be for working people. And I have two thoughts about that, and I'm curious what you think. On one hand, I think to myself, this city has been built, established, built, and advanced by working people throughout its history. And working people look different in lots of different ways, neighborhoods, expectations. I wonder, as someone who's been part of city government for the period of time that you have, and again, you have history in foundation world, you've now, as in the past, and in other capacities, But I'm just also wondering, when you hear that, do you think to yourself, well, we've always wanted this to be about working people. What is it that we missed? Or what is it that we wish we could do more of?
Yeah. This is probably a reflection of my time in government. I think there is, there's certainly new energy, and that is exciting, and that is positive. It's something to capitalize on. It's something to build on, of more people being engaged in the work of government, of politics. All of that is good. And I think that what comes next is harder. So what does it mean to translate words, rhetoric, communications to policies and programs that in fact improve people's lives? And that's the work we all have. It's the work that we've always had. There have been some extraordinary successes due to the heroics of so many public servants, and all of them will say that there's more work to do. And so I think those things can all be true. And it's the technocrat in me, the bureaucrat in me that's like, okay, let's go.
That's right.
What does that look like across all of the policy domains? How do we make government work better, and show, in addition to saying that we want to build a government in a city that works better for working people.
You were asked by someone, how can city government ensure that no one's left behind? You said it starts with policies, programs, and processes. A lot of our candidates don't talk about process very much.
I mean, it's, is it the most interesting set of things to talk about? Does it lend itself to good sound bites, sadly?
Could you run a campaign on procurement reform?
Well, I mean, could you run a campaign on the plumbing of government? Probably
there it is,
not.
the plumbing of government.
We should have, but one of the most important reflections, and the thing that I hope that more people focus on, every administrator and every level of government, is the plumbing. I mean, we spend so much time debating what government should do, and remarkably little time on whether government actually has the capacity to do it. Which are, if one wanted to have that conversation, then you have to talk about procurement, you have to talk about workforce and hiring, you have to talk about technology, you have to talk about capital project delivery, and find a way to communicate that where people's eyes don't gloss over, and you can change hearts and minds about why it's important. I mean, that part's imperative, but even more important is you then have to do the work,
right,
which does not lend itself to a lot of photo ops or even one political cycle or one news cycle.
That's right.
That's the challenge. But until we figure out as a city or many different levels of government what it means to improve the plumbing of government, then I think we will have, there'll be a lot of missed opportunity.
This from our conference. Thank you so much. You were at our conference and you spoke.
You threw a very good conference, so it was my pleasure to be
thank
there.
you. I did not ask you to say that, but I'm glad you did. This is you. On the point of plumbing, I think the question that a lot of us struggle with is it time to rip out the plumbing and install new plumbing, new funding, new pathways, or do we just need to keep changing the fixtures and deal with the plumbing we got?
That's a pretty extended, wonky metaphor, isn't it?
And it's also, and as you pointed out, when people hear that, their eyes glaze over because that's not a soundbite.
Right.
That's not a campaign promise. I'm going to fix the plumbing is not necessarily a campaign promise. And because I don't know if people understand what that means or what that could be. It's also worthy of saying, I'm dumbstruck sometimes and I certainly in my lifetime, I've had the ability to be present in campaigns and understand a little bit about how campaigns work. And this is not all about campaigns, but people get elected into office, and what gets them in versus what they actually inherit when they get there are two different things. And I just I'm wondering for you, Is it fair to say that, and you were part of the lead on the transition team, the person coming into office, really, they may have lots of thoughts and ideas, and they may have an electorate, and they may have their interests, and their goals, and their vision, and their priorities, but they actually don't know all of the inner workings until they show up. Is that fair to say?
It is true, and it's true even if one has been in government for a very long time. When you come into office, for example, you inherit a half a year of someone else's budget, right?
There's your starting point. You're inheriting.
That's right.
Right.
You
That's
inherit
your first
that.
problem.
You inherit constraints. You inherit conflicts that you did not choose.
That's right.
But you know what? Your job is to make and drive progress anyway. And so I think maybe the question, to be honest, is less whether you need to sell to the public procurement, workforce modernization technology, but if you believe that you need that in order to, for example, drive down the cost of housing, build more affordable units, really have universal child care, because it's true. You do need a well-functioning government, changes in procurement, the right talent, the right technology to enable that set of promises and commitments, and then the next set that you decide you're going to undertake. And if there is that belief, then you don't necessarily have to find a way to communicate wonky things to the public. You can still do the work and drive, as long as you can draw the relationship between working on these and actually getting the results that affect everyday people.
This is your quote. They say you campaign in poetry and govern in prose, but really you govern in budgets.
That's right.
Choices will need to be made, but I see these efforts as investments. The cost of inaction is much higher. Which leads me to, is it fair to say the most significant accomplishment of the Adams administration, City of Yes?
I'm biased. I think
I knew
it's
you would
up
be.
there. I think it's up there. I think it's significant not just as a technical set of changes, but really because it was a kind of a moral imperative. It reflected a real sea change in how we think about the importance of housing and how we talked about it, not just as units, but as really a matter of what type of city we are trying to have and trying to build.
That said, first off, it went through different iterations. It was a process. Also, is it fair to say that to put it in motion and to activate it in the way that perhaps was conceptualized through that process takes a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of trust and a lot of ongoing, to go back to your earlier point, a lot of ongoing opinions about what every neighborhood looks like or could look like or should look like. Is that fair to say?
It's all of the above, and the category that you didn't mention that I think is critical for any policy, housing, workforce, et cetera, is it takes an ongoing maniacal focus on execution and implementation. And that is often where I see really great ideas, really big legislative wins, where they don't meet the expectations or the aspirations that they were created to meet. And so I've been really happy with how this administration is committed to the implementation of the new tools that were achieved both because of City of Yes and the Charter Commission ballot initiatives, right?
Yep.
But it's another example of how this work is really a relay. And that has to be true not just for housing, but every other policy domain.
I have to now switch to controversy.
Okay.
There's a controversy between us. Here it is. This is between us. Switching gears. I didn't realize this. I was reading an article from Documented, who did a great job at the conference and covering our conference. And I did not catch this because the reporter says, Greg, referring to me, mentioned that economic development and workforce development aren't the same. What's your take? And Maria Torres-Springer said, it's yes and no, which is partly why challenges persist. And I was like, oh boy. So, why don't you tell me the difference
We
between...
can both clean up our responses.
Controversy.
There. It is, I think it might be healthy
No.
debate or evolving conversation.
Yes.
This is a really important topic, obviously. Is it economic development? Is it workforce development? Is it social service?
Yes.
Does it even matter how we define it? And depending on the definition, what are the barriers that then emerge? I think that's probably the most important part of the conversation. So I do think that economic development and workforce development have to be two sides of the same coin. I think what the work that needs to be done is that workforce development is not just bolted on to economic development, but becomes the engine of it. And we have to figure out what that means in terms of structure, in terms of budget, in terms of narrative, in terms of policy, to make those words, kind of that rhetoric, real. But if we don't, and I think there's nothing but opportunity for the larger field of workforce development and for this administration that really cares about workers to crack that code and build off of successes of the last few administrations.
Is it fair to say that workforce development, we've talked a little bit about this, is it fair to say that workforce development perhaps feels more like that plumbing problem?
I think it includes
Meaning it's hard to say, like, here's the win. It's underneath as you pointed out to start with, like, is it a supportive service? Is it attached onto something else? How do we know it's resulting in a meaningful wage? Like,
I think that it has plumbing issues, and it depends on good plumbing. Let me put it that way. But I also think that there is an overall narrative issue, which we've talked about before. How do you get people to engage with workforce development with the urgency that it deserves? And my time in government has showed me that, and this part might be controversial, not everyone likes it, is it's important to have a goal so everyone knows what you're talking about. It's important to build the right coalition of people who care about it, and not just the choir, but those who may not see themselves as part of the mission, but bring them into the mission. And then it's important to confront, this is back to the plumbing, whether an issue, who needs to be part of solving the problem. And in workforce development in particular, there are so many agencies. I've often talked about it as at its worst, it's a loose federation of well-meaning programs. And so being honest about what it means to make gains on workforce development as infrastructure requires really understanding the complexity of how it works in government, let alone the larger ecosystem of talent developers and other providers.
That's right. And to serve as a business solution.
Right.
Because ultimately without that, then what are we training people to do?
Yep. That's right. That's right. No, I mean, that's where, to the extent that some people don't think that workforce development is economic development, I think the answer is, really clear. Of course it is. Businesses need talent. People need jobs. Cities compete on their human capital. And if workforce investments lead to productivity, higher earnings, more tax revenues. So it is economic development, full stop. But sometimes when I think we say economic development, the human being is not legible
Right.
sometimes.
Right.
And workforce development has to be as human-centered and as possible. So I think maybe there is also where some of the disconnect exists.
And it is a significant disconnect. And because there's a significant disconnect, I think it's also true that it gets very hard to talk about wins related to workforce development, which then compromises an elected official's ability to be able to say, I invested in this thing and look how it made people's lives better. Is that fair to say?
I think it's one of the challenges.
Yeah.
In the work, and you don't want to be reductive.
That's right. That's right.
You don't want, even if you had a big round number of a goal, to pretend that is the only way to solve some of these issues. But I think equipping policymakers and others who can be supported with what works, the specific things that need to be fixed, all anchored in what's the North Star.
Right.
How do we know we're successful in this work?
How do we agree on that?
And how do we agree on that? It could be a few ways we're successful, but I think that has been elusive.
That's right.
In this field.
I loved you had another one of the other articles about just talking about the transition piece. Someone asked you about making assumptions. This is you. Assumptions are usually well-intentioned. I think the program should work this way. But once implemented, you learn it doesn't work for two working parents or for single-parent households or because language access wasn't strong enough. These things must be co-designed with the people affected. The idea there being that not only do we have to think about what a win is, we got to think about how it works in a city that is complicated, complex, with unique needs in every direction. There's not one part of the universe that isn't represented here. And you've got to try to figure out how, in this case, workforce development works for all of the above.
Right.
Speaking of workforce development.
Can I just say, on that point, I think it really makes you think about the question of what is determinative of a training program, a workforce program success. Is it the curriculum, the training content? Surely that is a big part of it, of course, but it's also how people's lives, housing, transportation,
that's right,
childcare, and some people call it the friction that exists in people's lives. It's just people's lives. Right? Like the housing market determines the labor market. It determines, and housing instability means you can't stay often in a job. Transportation dictates what jobs are accessible to you.
Right.
Childcare determines whether you can participate in the labor force at all. And so once it requires us to really understand the human beings who we are trying to help, and that they don't have these problems, a housing problem on Monday, and on Tuesday there's a transportation problem, and Wednesday it's a childcare problem. These are all of the challenges in their lives every day, and our systems are organized still too much in terms of agencies and budgets and silos. So that's the systemic work that we need to undertake if we are really going to start with what does the human being need.
That's right. As we get into human being needs, you had a great comment that you made from the piece in Vital City about how things really get done in government. And you said, don't mistake activity for direction. I thought that's an interesting comment. And then the second part of it was, don't sleep on culture. A big part of the mayor's success will be whether he can actually create what I've described as a kind of low drama city hall, where it's clear from day one as to what is being prized is quiet, effective execution and not political theater. Which I think relates back to the idea of, are we accomplishing things in people's lives as the priority? And it's not about an individual's championing certain moves or expectations or things, but it's about how do we actually move needles in people's lives? Is that fair to say?
That's right. And whether you recruit, maintain, empower a workforce within government that can stay focused on that issue. And so the work of building the right culture that prizes the right things, that doesn't distract public servants from the work that they're doing, becomes so critical. We used to say a lot on the team what it means to walk a straight line to whatever our objective was. And first of all, you have to know what that objective is. And so if you know what the goals are, whether it was City of Yes or the work that we were doing with apprenticeships and a number of others, then regardless of what the distractions, what the headlines might be in any given day, all of the political ups and downs, the team knows that it needs to walk a straight line to still get that project done. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because there's a real understanding of the culture that is needed to withstand the many distractions in government and achieve things anyway.
Given all of that, what is your reaction to the pivot? I don't want to say pivot, perhaps is the wrong word. What is your reaction to the title of a deputy mayor having economic development, workforce development in it, to being replaced by a title that has economic justice in it?
What I've believed from the beginning is that when we as a city, people who care about these issues, can move from a debate about justice, development, growth, to the actual substance, we will be in a better place. You could call it justice, development, security, call it a ham sandwich. That matters less than whether the programs, the policies, the plans that you are not just communicating, but you are executing on, actually improve people's lives. So I'm looking forward to a time when that is what we are talking about versus agonizing over words.
You can't see it, but there was just this extraordinary smile at the end of that as Maria looked up after finishing that. I want to ask you have history at the Ford Foundation.
Yes.
Now you're back in the foundation universe. Tell me how that work started. Tell me where you are now. I'm thrilled that you have this great new gig, and I hope you're feeling good about it. We've talked a little bit about it outside of this pod, but tell me a little bit about the Ford Foundation experience. And I'm just curious if is this feeling a little full circle for you or no?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I feel like my entire career is like one big continuous circle of trying to do my part, regardless of the organization I'm in or the hat that I'm wearing, to be a helper. And my first tour in philanthropy was at the Ford Foundation. I worked with the incredible Darren Walker and did the work across the country as head of U.S. programs. And it was an amazing experience. A lot of that time was also during the pandemic. And it was really inspiring to see a decision that he made that then had amazing ripple effects across the field of philanthropy, where we issued a social bond that allowed us to really support our grantees given this existential set of and compounding and overlapping crises during the pandemic. And so that experience taught me a lot to be back in philanthropy at the Revson Foundation that has done a very different type of place, but has been so committed. The work of my predecessor, Julie Sandorf, has just been incredible. And there it's a different type of plumbing, I'll say, that we've been historically focused on. And it's the plumbing of democracy. So we've funded a number of organizations historically in journalism, at higher ed like CUNY, and in Jewish life as well. These are, and I'm excited to continue that work and find out in other ways, given contemporary challenges, for philanthropy to do what it does best. Philanthropy can never replace government.
That's right. That's right.
Philanthropy has its constraints. It also has its superpowers. And I've been fortunate to have had these roles and have been in and out of government to be able every now and then to kind of get on the balcony and see where the gaps are and where the superpowers are. And I'm trying to do my very best to wield the superpowers of a Revson Foundation in ways that are most impactful for our work here in New York and in Israel.
There's no one better at wielding superpower than Maria Torres-Springer. Before we wrap up, I have in my hands a few photos. Now, because we're just audio, people can't see this.
Right.
But here's what's going to happen.
Okay.
I'm going to show a picture, and I want you to tell people what's in it.
Okay.
And how you react
I'm ready.
or relate to this. Okay?
Okay.
This is you at HP. This is an HPD photo. Okay? So this is the glorious Maria Torres-Springer. And who is this person that we see in this photo?
This is a person. I'm sitting in a conference room at HPD, and I have a full head of black hair versus what I have today, which is my glorious gray hair.
There it is. Look at that. I mean, look how happy you look and excited.
I do. Those were, in some ways, simpler times. And it's interesting. I'm looking at where this is from. I mean, my time at HPD, let me tell you, that organization, it was the largest of the agencies that I ran, and it is unmatched in its ability to execute on housing goals across the country, if not globally. I have to say, I have nothing but admiration. I learned a lot about big government. The agencies come in all shapes and sizes.
That's right.
And HPD is a very particular type of organization.
100%. Okay, ready? Next one.
I'm ready.
Next one. Here it is. The title on this one, Women Shall Lead NYC.
I love this. So this photo, this was the day that I was appointed as deputy mayor in the Adams administration. I am surrounded by a number of incredible women, and I'll just mention two of them because I do it every opportunity I have. I'm very close still with former Deputy Mayor Mira Joshi and former Deputy Mayor Ann Williams-Isom, and I learned so much from them. We still text every day. The idea of having a pit crew in your life. And I think you use this term, and I've since
That's
talked
right.
about
Yes.
it incessantly.
Yes. The pit crew.
A pit crew of people who support you, who keep you tethered, who teach you, and that you commit to being a pit crew of someone else's life and career. I'm so fortunate just looking at the images of these ladies to call them part of my pit crew, and hopefully they feel like I'm part of theirs.
Last one. Here it is. Headline here, Maria Torres-Springer to expand deputy mayor role. And this is my personal favorite.
There's a photo of a tour in the Bronx that we did for, I was at EDC. And that's the photo. But
the photos from EDC,
The
right.
photos from EDC, but I remember this a year into the Adams administration, when there was a departure of our chief housing officer who did great work, that I inherited the housing portfolio, and I was so happy to be able to help in that way. And I kept all of those portfolios as first deputy mayor,
Right.
because I not just because I care so much about it, but to the point that I made earlier about implementation. I think we talk a lot about speed in government service and effectiveness. There's another concept that I think is even more important, and that's velocity. We can't just, we work with urgency, and we can get a lot done by going fast, but it is having really clear goals and doing everything you can to empower great teams. You achieve the velocity of action in government that if everything goes well, if you're doing your job right, what that actually means, which is most important, is a velocity of progress and impact in people's lives.
I picked these three for a variety of different reasons. The HBD experience, I'm sure, was transformational, as you pointed out. Amazing organization, so much tremendous work in the teams leading that shop. You led EDC, which is fantastic. I love this photo, the last one you pointed to, because it looks like you're in the Bronx and you're looking at like urban blight. I think they wanted a picture that seemed like it was like in the middle of nowhere, and you look very serious as you're reflecting on it. And I love that about you. And then I also love this, and I think it gets forgotten sometimes, that this cohort of women leading New York City was historic and powerful. And you've made history a number of different times in a number of different ways. To be part of that cohort and to lead the city from where you sat is an extraordinary thing. And I just want to champion you for being the leader, and so many firsts along the way. Last picture to wrap us up. This is actually the one from the conference. And I have to say, I'm gonna shoot you straight in this one. I don't think you look any happier than you do at the conference in this particular photo right there. Who is this? What's the future
look at
for this glorious? You can take that.
I have the same level of optimism today about our city that I did my first day in city government. And actually, every time I speak with early career professionals, students or people just starting in government, I'm filled with nothing but jealousy. I have because what I see, despite all that might be hard, is just boundless opportunity to make our city better, to make it one where opportunity is actually within reach, where people can afford a home, they have access to good jobs, they're able to contribute, and that. I've also often said, and maybe this is a kind of a good place to, it's a place that encapsulates how I feel. If this country is called, and sometimes it is this, sometimes it isn't, but the land of opportunity, New York City is the purest and greatest distillation of that ambition and that promise. And so that's the project. That's the project moving forward for everyone, regardless of whether you're inside of government or outside of government. You've been involved in politics or not, and what a privilege to have that, to be part of that mission.
Thank you for everything you have accomplished to today. I'm excited for everything that's happening for you and for our city from here, given everything that you are and how it is you think. Appreciative of your partnership, your engagement. Our breakfasts are always a treat. And I just want to say thank you for coming out today. And I look forward to working with you to make this the New York that it can and should be.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria.